Some people are emboldened by Donald Trump's re-election. Others want to flee the country. And others think that no matter who won or who wins in the future, a country that is diametrically opposed and has $36 trillion in debt is still doomed. So what are the best passports to escape the United States? But first, a brief warning. We've been getting a lot of calls here at Nomad Capitalist from people saying, I just need to get a passport. People are in a rush. And before you do that, you want to plan your escape properly. You might not even need a passport. It might be a residence permit that you need to live where you want. You might need a couple of passports. You might need one now and one later. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Work with our team professionally. Don't rush. Do it the right way. A lot of people who dislike Trump want to go to Europe for more liberal social policies. But many conservatives tell us they want European passports also for the flexibility and to give their children and future generations more opportunities. If you're lucky, you can get what's called citizenship by descent in Europe by claiming a passport through your ancestry. One of our colleagues recently did this in Spain as the descendant of Sephardic Jews. But you can have family from Ireland, Italy, Slovakia, Lithuania, or pretty much most countries in Europe. Latin American and Caribbean countries offer citizenship by descent also. Now, the problem with citizenship by descent is the process can literally take years. One friend of mine waited 4 years to get his Italian citizenship for himself and his children. His dad waited almost 6 years, for reasons that my Nomad Capitalist R&D colleague explains here.
Citizenship by descent is essentially a citizenship you're entitled to by virtue of the blood, by virtue of your blood. More specifically, by virtue of your ancestry. So, who is eligible for citizenship by descent? It's simple. If your ancestor or ancestors came from another country, it is possible that you might be able to reclaim the citizenship of your grandparents or great-grandparents, and in some rare occasions, even the citizenship of your ancestors that came long before your great-grandparents. Now, the key thing to understand here is that this is different from citizenship by investment, where you have to commit a large amount of money in the form of a donation or a real estate purchase, and it is also different from citizenship by naturalization, where you usually have to relocate to a specific country and you have to spend time in that specific country. You often have to take a test, which includes a civics element to it and also a language element to it. In the case of citizenship by descent, it's as simple, quote unquote, as to locate the country where your grandparents, your great-grandparents, if you're lucky, where your parents came from, and then essentially just notifying that you are their descendant and that you wish to claim that citizenship back. Now, it sounds pretty easy, but the road to actually claim that citizenship might be a tad complicated, especially if the ancestor that came from another country is far removed from you. So if it's your parents or your grandparents, it is a more manageable scenario than if it is your great-grandparents or potentially beyond that.
For someone who wants to live in Europe right now, either because they don't want to live in the same country as Donald Trump, or just because they want to escape what are still high taxes in the United States. Yes, plenty of European countries do have pretty substantial tax incentives for new arrivals, but no matter which camp you're in, a years-long passport wait means you won't be able to move to Europe right away. There are a few exceptions to that, like in Italy, where you can file the case in court and then go and spend your time there, but most countries don't work that way. The easiest second passport to get in Europe if you don't have ancestry, or if you don't want to wait, is that of Malta, a country that a lot of people haven't heard about, but offers a lot of power as an under-the-radar, tax-friendly country, which offers citizenship for your entire family in exchange for a donation. Malta is pretty unique in that it's part of the European Union, and you may not think that you want to live there, but it gives you the same benefits as an Irish or a French or a Spanish passport that you might think is more useful. And with the euro barely worth more than the dollar today, the whole process will cost you about $950,000 with all the fees for yourself and a little bit extra for each member of the family. You can literally add your spouse, you can add your children, and with some of these programs, you can add even people like your parents, so everyone has access to live, work, study, and travel in Europe, or the option to do that anytime in the future if you're not ready to actually move now. The cool thing about a citizenship by investment program, or what Malta calls its MEIN, is you don't have to commit to going and living in the country. You don't have to pay taxes there. You can choose to keep the passport in your back pocket, or once you get it in your hand, which in the case of Malta starts with a residence permit, and then a passport within about 18 months of application, you can actually go and live in Europe.
How will Malta tax you? Malta is not a 0% tax country. Let's get that out of the way, of course. You will be taxed at a flat tax rate. So what you are required to do is you are required to remit 100,000 euros to Malta, and you are paying 15% tax on that, which brings us to an effective rate of 15,000 euros. Anything above the 100,000 euros that you remit, you will still be paying 15% tax. It's just that they will require that 100,000 euros minimum remittance in order to treat you as a tax resident.
Being a Maltese citizen allows you not only to live in tax-friendly Malta, but in any European country where you'd like, now or in the future. I think a lot of people don't realize the benefits that just as someone who lives in California can move to Texas, someone who is a citizen of Malta can choose to go and live in tax-friendly Switzerland. And yes, Switzerland isn't part of the European Union, but EU citizens do have special rights of settlement there. And with Malta, your children can get the passport also. Citizenship can be passed down to future generations, meaning they can live in Europe also, no matter what happens in the world. So for someone who has a US or a Canadian passport and is frustrated that, hey, I can move states, but I can't get away from my federal government, being a citizen in Europe, for all the problems they have, means you've got close to 30 different options. You're basically 30xing your optionality in terms of picking places you can go to be safe from whatever threats happen. There are other ways to get European citizenship, including having it granted by the president. For example, one African man was granted French citizenship after saving a child in Paris as a thanks for his extraordinary merit and contributions to the country. Entrepreneurs can get citizenship like this in other countries for hiring a lot of people or making large investments, but in many EU countries that allow that flexibility to move across Europe, those investments could often go into the tens of millions of euros. The best known program of this nature is in Austria, but there are others, and they can be expensive. Adriana Lima was granted Serbian citizenship, while French actor Gerard Depardieu was granted Russian citizenship by Vladimir Putin. And we understand that Steven Seagal was granted citizenship in both. Of course, neither Serbia or Russia allows freedom of movement across Europe, but both offer a backup plan and both offer another place to live. The point being that there are other countries you can do that, but that's an expensive way to go, and almost always more expensive than Malta. One way, if you don't have $1 million or millions of dollars to get access to Europe without actually getting citizenship, is through a golden visa. Now, while Spain is shuttering its program, more well-known countries in Europe, like Portugal and Greece, have golden visa programs, all the way down to lesser-known countries like Latvia and Luxembourg that grant residence permits in exchange for investments. In Portugal or Greece, for example, you can invest around €500,000 into something that, unlike Malta's citizenship program, you can actually potentially get back at some point in the future. That investment qualifies you for a residence permit. But with golden visas, unlike most residence permits, you don't necessarily have to live in the country. Again, you can keep that residence permit in your back pocket. And in the case of Portugal in particular, you can keep the clock working towards the time at which you can apply for citizenship in about 6 years without actually having to be there. Now, that's not true for all the countries, but it gives you the optionality of moving to Europe when you don't like conditions in your country without having to be there if you want to qualify for citizenship on a slower timeline in exchange for not donating $1 million or more. In Portugal, spending as little as an average of 1 week per year can qualify you for citizenship, but unlike in Malta, you will need to learn some basic language skills. Portugal is the most likely to naturalize citizens based on historical precedent through its golden visa program, while Greece prefers to focus on ethnic Greeks for naturalization, meaning it's harder to turn a Greek golden visa into a passport. And Latvia has an incredibly high amount of physical presence needed to qualify, meaning you'd have to live there almost all the time to get citizenship as well as learn the language, making programs like Greece and Latvia less interesting for those not willing to move or not willing to learn the language, particularly if your goal is citizenship and not just a lifetime residence permit. If your goal was simply to live in Europe, though, and you can wait to get a second passport, a golden visa offers an interesting hybrid with the flexibility to not be there if you don't want to be, while offering that pathway to citizenship that's easier than everyone else who's naturalizing. Time or money are the choices you have when it comes to getting citizenship. And if you invest money in these countries, they make the pathway easier than someone who, for example, came to just get a job. Countries like Greece and Italy also offer tax incentives to new arrivals, meaning that stereotypically high European taxes don't have to apply to you for periods of up to 15 years. Plenty of time for you to get your citizenship without having to pay high taxes. And because European countries often have tax treaties with other high-tax countries, it may make tax planning in the country that you're leaving more easy than moving to tax-free countries. With a golden visa, unlike with a citizenship by investment program, your investment is lower and can generally be recovered. The downside is the time to get a passport, but you can live in Europe now if you want. And for people who want to take the extreme step of giving up U.S. citizenship, there are other programs that you can use to get citizenship in a year or less in countries that you might not want to live in. This is where my warning comes into play. Sometimes the best path to escape your country is a residence permit for where you want to live, ideally one that turns into citizenship, and a passport somewhere else that allows you to exit the country you don't want to be associated with anymore. That's a more extreme step. It's one we talk to our clients about. Again, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. One European country in the news these days that's hard to escape to is the UK. For all the talk of Ellen and others moving to the Cotswold, what Steve Bannon calls an invasion, London actually has few paths for passive investors or business owners to relocate, and you can't just live there on a tourist visa. That's one thing Americans should understand. There are limits to how long you can spend in other countries. In much of Europe, it's 90 out of 180 days. And if you show up in the UK, even though you can get a 180-day tourist visa on arrival, they're going to want to know what you're doing there. And if the answer is, I'm coming here to live, they're going to send you back. So having a legal path to live wherever you want to be is important. As to why the UK makes it difficult for nomad capitalists and people with wealth to move to the UK, here's what he told me back at Nomad Capitalist Live in 2022.
If I wanted to come and start a business, the UK did cancel earlier this year the UK investor visa on the idea that Russians are 18% of it, and that we don't want Russians coming in the days before the Russia-Ukraine war. What are your thoughts on investment and entrepreneurship, immigration, and what the UK can do to bring people, if they should?
Well, I mean, generally what the UK has done over the last few years is to encourage mass immigration of unskilled labour. And then they wonder that our productivity rate's going down. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we've discouraged, by getting rid of non-dom status, by even getting rid of VAT-free shopping for those going back to Qatar or wherever it may be. We've done everything to discourage high net worth individuals coming into London who might invest some money. I mean, this under a Conservative government. I mean, they're not being Conservative.
People think, oh, if I just vote for Trump, if Liz Truss gets in, everything's solved, just relax.
No, it doesn't work like that. Yeah. Actually, I mean, I tell you what, I mean, if we take economics, or social issues too, we know the left's agenda. We know it's command economy. We know it's high tax. We know it's high regulation. Yeah. We know it's all redistribution. We know it's welfare, 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 welfare. We know all that stuff. So look, again, with Brexit, we've now got the chance to sort this out. You can forget the European Union. Forget it. You know, it is not going to be competitive. It is not going to work. You've got a north-south divide on a currency that should never have been introduced. You know, the euro should never have ever gone to the Mediterranean. You've got an east-west cultural split with Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic having very different social values to Western Europe.
But not everybody wants to escape to Europe. Some prefer the warmer waters of the Caribbean. British overseas territories like the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos allow you to buy real estate, generally $1 million or multi-millions of dollars, or to simply form a company and get a residence permit. The Bahamas does the same, but you'll actually need to live there to get citizenship. And a quick side note, living in a British overseas territory and going on to get a BOTC passport like a Cayman Islands passport does give you a pathway to then go and apply for British citizenship once you have that. So if you want to live with Ellen in the Cotswolds, living in the tax-friendly British Caribbean could be a way to do that. But you will have to commit spending the vast majority of your year on that island in order to qualify for the citizenship. So again, that's the difference between a residence permit and a citizenship. If your goal is to move to the Cayman Islands or to the Bahamas, you're not going to get a citizenship out of the gate. You'll get a residence permit, and if you spend enough time there, again, in the BOTCs, about 9 months per year, you can get that passport eventually. But people should understand that getting the second passport, while I think it's important for everybody, may not be what you want in terms of getting access to the place that you want to live. Every nomad capitalist should have a second passport, but it doesn't have to be the place that you live. For those that do want a passport faster, there are 5 countries in the Caribbean, 2 of which are also tax-free, that offer passports in about a year in exchange for a donation. Unlike buying real estate or forming a company, this is money that you can't get back. Now, these islands charge much less for the privilege than Malta because they aren't part of the EU and they don't offer you the chance to live in Switzerland or Spain or France. But if you become a citizen of an Eastern Caribbean country, you do have access to other Eastern Caribbean countries you can live in, as well as a larger union called the Caribbean Community. That includes countries like Belize. Donations for these so-called citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean start at about $200,000. That's double what I paid to become St. Lucian years ago because prices have increased, as have the waiting times. What took me 5 or 6 months to get St. Lucian citizenship might take you closer to a year. That's thanks to the countries that many people are trying to escape, putting pressure on smaller countries that people use to escape to make their lives more difficult. There's now an interview requirement to get citizenship. There's longer due diligence times to make sure the programs are running properly. And again, the price doubled. So that's the price of not being prepared to escape your country earlier. But if you want the protection of a neutral, non-interventionist country that you can fall back on in times of chaos, Caribbean countries are pretty solid options, and they're some of the most affordable ways to get citizenship without having to leave home. In 4 to 5 cases, you literally don't even have to go there. But we're also seeing more of our open-minded clients look toward more exotic options, realizing that the decline of the West means they should seek options outside of the West. I've said for years, and I said it when Donald Trump got reelected again, the headlines are always, I want to move to Canada. I want to move to the UK. I want to move to Australia. That's like jumping from the frying pan to another frying pan. You want to leave the paradigm, not just the country. If you have a Western passport, something that's different isn't the worst idea to have as a second passport. So while a European Union passport gives you access and could be a good second passport, what we're seeing more clients say is, give me a third passport that offers geopolitical diversification like that in Turkey. While some Americans may turn their nose up at Turkey as a Muslim country or an emerging country, you can get citizenship in substantially under 1 year by simply buying an apartment.
The Turkish Citizenship by Investment program is a wonderful option. Although it has evolved throughout the years, it is still very good for people who want to get citizenship through investing in a tangible asset. Its strategic location in Asia and Europe makes it a wonderful option, not only for people who want to just, again, invest, but also for people who want to do business there and just have easier access to Turkey due to the passport. So one of the biggest advantages of the Turkish citizenship by investment is the very, very convenient investment. So you are investing $400,000 in real estate. It can be multiple properties. It doesn't have to be only one property. And the important thing is for these properties to be at least $400,000 in value. So you also need to annotate on the title deed that you are maintaining these properties for at least 3 years, and then you will be able to sell it. So even though the citizenship can be obtained quite quickly, usually in about 12 months, the process of maintaining the property needs to continue for 3 years. There is a very big advantage if you decide to keep the property for a longer period of time. So if you maintain it for 5 years, then actually you will not be taxed on the capital gain.
And we've seen an increase in clients who want a strong, serious country, in some contrast to the small Caribbean islands that offer citizenship by investment. But people are saying, I want a country that is different, and I want a passport that's different than the one I came from. And it doesn't hurt that in the case of Turkey, you can actually turn a profit on the passport, because after 3 years, you can resell your property to someone as long as they're not using it to get citizenship themselves. I bought an apartment in Turkey 4 years ago, and it's done pretty well, as I talked about last year.
So in my case, the renovations, again, some of that may have been wiped away, but generally speaking, you can keep pace with the dollar. I outpace the dollar because at 7.5 million Turkish lira now, that's $403,000. And so $403,000 on $319 invested. I bought in December of 2020. Renovations were started in August 2021, and we finished paying for them into 2022. So the money wasn't all put up front. But if you just figure as if the money was put up front, we figured out it's about a 14% return. Plus, again, saved about $6,000 in the last 10 months since the renovations were finished enough to where somebody could go and spend time there. So had Mrs. H and her family there earlier for some stuff they needed. Had various people from the team, and I've used it myself. And so I figured the $6,000 based on, if a team member, if a lower level colleague who stayed at the place, they wouldn't be staying at the St. Regis down the street. They wouldn't be staying at the Park Hyatt on the street, whereas I might have. And so I kind of calculated in the different levels. So 14% return a year.
On the extreme end of things, Egypt is much less developed than Turkey. Cairo is an interesting city, but not really comparable to Istanbul. They also have a similar passport program that requires $100,000 less in investment into real estate and offers a much lesser passport. I would imagine most people will be far better off staying with Turkey to start. Of course, the most standard way to become a citizen is the one that you've heard for years. You see people in your country going to naturalization ceremonies and waving the flag. They put the time in on the ground. They learned the language. They went through a process to become a citizen by naturalization. And the reality is there are countries where it's a lot faster and easier than it is where you live. For example, Argentina and Peru require just 2 years of legal residence in their country before you can apply for citizenship. Now, you'll need to learn Spanish, but just getting the residence permit itself is substantially easier than getting a green card or moving to Canada. Generally, in Latin American countries, if you can show anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a month in income, you don't even need to send that money to the other country. You just need to show them you have it in exchange for getting residence. Once you have that residence permit, you can move to the other country, spend their prescribed amount of time, generally 6 months is a minimum amount. Other countries ask for 8 or 9 months a year. And after the number of years prescribed to apply for naturalization, you simply apply for your passport. There's no donations to make. In many cases, as in Latin America and even some Western European countries, you don't even have to put any money into the country other than show them you have it. Now, of course, living in a country for 6, 8, 9 or more months per year may subject you to taxes, which is where, again, this is about more than just getting a passport. It's about having a holistic plan that addresses helping you get out of the country you no longer feel part of. That's where Nomad Capitalist comes in. European Union countries all require at least 5 years and sometimes more of hard time on the ground for citizenship. And if you're not qualifying for a golden visa, you'll need to spend the majority of your time in that country. And again, some are tax friendly, but not all are. You will need to do European taxes if getting citizenship there by naturalization. But even far-flung countries like Mauritius in Africa can theoretically naturalize you after 2 years just for buying a villa starting at about $375,000. That could be a perfect place to escape the next world war somewhere far away from where the fur is flying. So you get to choose when it comes to getting a passport to escape. Number 1, do I need a passport to move to the place that I want to move to? Do I need a residence permit to start? Do I need a residence permit and a passport somewhere else? Or just maybe I can get a passport in a different country, such as I can get Polish citizenship through my ancestry. And once I have that, I can go and live in the country in Europe that I really want to live in. But the bigger question is, do I want to pay with my time or do I want to pay with my money? Do I want to change my life? Do I want to commit time to a country? Do I want to invest in becoming part of that country? Or would I rather just pay? For a lot of people that we work with, paying gives them back lifestyle freedom and a lot of opportunity costs saved. There are also plenty of less desirable passport options that may suit specific cases, but aren't as appealing overall. Vanuatu has a citizenship by investment program. This South Pacific country has an increasingly bad reputation, having lost visa-free travel to countries like the UK and Ireland and all of Europe, basically. It is a tax-free country, and if all you want to do is use a Vanuatu passport to go and live in Vanuatu, you don't even have to do that. Vanuatu has a residence program, but the passport does offer more permanence. Nauru, in the same neighborhood in the South Pacific, has a brand new passport program, the most affordable in the citizenship by investment space at just $105,000, but that's not a place you can really go and live. It offers a passport to travel on and to get residence permits in if you want to live somewhere else, but it's not really the ultimate backup plan. And for all the good that President Bukele has done for his country in El Salvador, their new Freedom Passport at a price point of $1 million is not only not fully ready to go, but exceedingly expensive for what you get. And don't even get me started on the fraudulent Mexican passports that influencers sell. This is not a new scam. People have been doing it for years, but it's not a legal way to get citizenship. If you're giving some guy who knows a guy $50,000 under the table, that's just not a good way to get a passport. We have recommended getting residence permits in Mexico for years, and that is a path that you can use to work towards Mexican citizenship. You don't even have to spend the entire naturalization period living there, but paying a guy isn't the way to go. So here's the bottom line. You need a second passport because the country that you might want to escape or are now ready to escape may be violating what you believe are human rights or impinging on your freedoms. Chances are they're raising your taxes, and even if you think that Trump will lower taxes, they're not going to be lowered to zero or anywhere near the levels that dozens of other countries around the world offer you. Having a second passport gives you a backup plan, and if you decide to ever divorce your country, well, having a second passport allows you to do that instantaneously rather than having to wait the timelines that we're talking about. So it's always better to be years too early than days too late. And we've seen clients who've tried to get second passports when they wanted to escape, but they didn't have enough time. But again, your second passport doesn't have to be where you actually want to live. Take Malta, for example. Very few people who pay that $950,000 or so actually go to live in Malta. Some keep the passport in their back pocket. Some figure their kids will go to university in Europe as Europeans. Others use it as a Tier A travel document to go pretty much anywhere they want in the world without having to be American. And others use it to move to other countries in Europe. Again, you want passports that give you optionality, that give you ideally more than one place that you can go, or that offer something that's different than what you have now. One client of ours became a Maltese citizen and then moved to Switzerland, where he paid half the tax under their lump sum program because Europeans get a better deal than Americans. And had he remained American, or had he used his American passport to move to Switzerland, he would have paid double the amount. So he paid back his donation to Malta in about 4 years of tax savings in Switzerland, getting a free second passport, and everything after that was gravy. If escaping your country is new to you, here's the advice that I've been giving for years. Go where you're treated best, and go where you're treated best for each part of your life. You don't have to live, bank, invest, and have every constituent part of your life in one country. You want to have some compartmentalization. The best passport should be the best passport. Again, it may not be the place that you want to live. It may not even be your identity. Use a passport as a strategic tool to escape your country. And if you want to get an extra passport in the future and you want to feel more aligned with that, a lot of clients, they'll get a Caribbean citizenship or they'll get some other second passport through donation. And then years later, they'll finally collect that citizenship by descent passport they can feel more emotional about. But they did what was strategically necessary for them to escape their country. Again, whether that's high taxes, whether that's political disagreements, whether that's personal safety, they did what they had to do. Don't think that getting a passport somewhere means you need to live there or move all of your money there or even have any connection there. A passport is a travel document. It offers access to a country, or in the case of Europe or the Caribbean, a number of countries. But it gives you an identity that you can rely on through wars, trade wars, geopolitical events, all sorts of chaos, all sorts of impositions on your personal freedom. Your passport and your residence permit can be different. It's often worthwhile to consider a more affordable way to get a cheaper second passport and pair it with a residence where you want to actually live. We'll have clients, for example, who will spend $950,000 to get Malta citizenship, live in Europe, travel the world as a European. But we have plenty of others who get a far less expensive passport and then pair that with a European golden visa to be able to access Europe year-round, or an even cheaper residence permit that requires them to live in Europe if that's what they want to do. There's so many options. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, we work with folks who have liquid net worths of $1 million or more, or if you have a high six-figure income, that will qualify as well. It's a bespoke service about making sure the puzzle pieces fit right. As someone who escaped the United States himself, I know what you're going through, and I've built the service that I wish existed when I started all this almost 15 years ago. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. There's not only well over a dozen citizenship by investment programs and a number of golden visa programs, but there's residence permits all over Latin America and Europe and Africa and Asia that you can use. Not everybody should follow Ellen to the UK. Many of the things that you see in the media don't even make sense to me of how did that person move to that country? What is their residence permit? How did they do that? You can't just move to these countries as an American and say, here I am. You have to have the right residence permits and passports. That's what we help people do.
This is Oman, and today we're showing you luxury living in its beautiful capital city of Muscat. Now we're going to show you one of the sexiest luxury villas here in Oman.
We're going to show you how to live like a king